so excited and happy to be here today, and thank you for coming. Let me just pull this. Great. So I know that the title I submitted was focused really on H. pylori, the bacteria that I studied, but I thought for this talk I actually wanted to change the title a little bit to Finding My Niche, the Survival Strategies of a First-Gen Student in Academia, because that's part of my background. So just to give you an idea of where I come from, I wanted to start this talk with an introduction of my path to science and how I got to Stanford, and then at the end I'll talk a bit about my research and hopefully convince you guys that microbiology and biology in general is really cool. So, as was mentioned, I grew up in LA, and really LA City. I kind of a pet peeve of mine when people tell me they're from LA and they're like from Ventura or like Orange County. I'm actually from LA City, grew up about 10 minutes away from downtown LA, which is shown here. And I am also a first-generation college student. My parents both came from China back in the 80s. They grew up in kind of the rural villages of southern China and had an opportunity to immigrate here to the US and first settled in Boston. That's where I was born, and they kind of couldn't take the cold, so they decided to move west and settle here in LA. And so as a first-generation college student, as I'm sure many of you are, it's a challenge sometimes to figure out what resources are available to you and what the information is that's out there to help you get to the next part of your career or your life. But I'll talk a little bit about this later, but I had some really great mentors throughout my whole life that really looked out for me and gave me the information to move on to college and then later on to grad school. So I ended up going to Caltech, which I'm curious, how many of you have heard of Caltech? Oh wow, that's great, because when I told my friends in high school and even the teachers, they didn't really know what Caltech was, and I always have to tell them that it's kind of like the MIT of the West Coast. It's a school that's very focused. It stands for the California Institute of Technology. It's very focused on science and engineering, and I wouldn't have known about the school had a mentor of mine not told me about it. I was, as a kid, ever since I could remember, I was always very interested in science, and so I knew that I wanted to go into a scientific training program. And so Caltech seemed to be a really great place. They had a relationship with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one of the NASA centers, and also famously, they're known for the pranks. The undergraduates are known for the pranks that they do. So you may or may not know about the rivalry with MIT. So this is actually not a rivalry with MIT, but some students had actually gone up to the Hollywood sign, covered it up, and then replaced the letters with Caltech there. So those are some of the kind of quirks that the undergrads do. So at Caltech, I did get a lot of great scientific training, and I made some really great connections with professors who I'll also kind of mention later on. But to be honest, Caltech was really difficult for me. It was a very stressful 4 years because I felt like I wasn't as well prepared as some of these other students who had so much more preparation before getting to college. And there were definitely times where I thought, why did they admit me? Was this a fluke? How am I going to get through this? And I remember freshman year, I didn't even consider transferring out because I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But I knew in the back of my mind that there would always be that regret if I didn't continue and really push myself. And after 4 years, I did graduate, and I made some really great connections with professors. One of the really exciting things that happened in my senior year was that I actually got awarded a fellowship called the Fulbright. And so I highly encourage you when you to look into these fellowship programs because they really give you the opportunity to go somewhere else to either do research or teach English. So that's what the Fulbright program is for. It was created by Senator Fulbright in the 40s after World War II, in hopes to have this basically this student exchange program to promote better relationships between the U.S. and other countries. So the Fulbright program is connected to almost all the different countries in the world, and when you apply, you choose a specific country to apply to. So in my case, I chose Germany. And you can either go there and do research, or you could go and teach English. And it's really a great time to really learn how to be on your own and to kind of learn about other cultures. And so this was a year-long fellowship that I did after graduating from Caltech. And I was in this city here in the north called Bremen. Berlin, the capital, is over here in the east. And it was a really awesome year. You know, it was my first time being away from home. Caltech was only about 15 minutes away from my home. So even though I lived on campus, you know, I always had my parents close by and everything. But I basically packed my bags and moved to Germany for a year and didn't come back until a year later. And it was a great time. It was scary at first, but I definitely made some amazing friends and learned a lot about how people do science in Germany and how kind of people collaborate across countries, actually. So after my year in Germany, I came back. I actually had applied to grad school at the same time as applying to the Fulbright, and I luckily also got accepted to grad school. So when I came back, I just had to start. I didn't have to apply and then wait another year. So I decided to come to Stanford. So this picture is actually of me when I was in Germany, but it's me at a microscope, which is basically what I'm doing now. You'll later see what I mean with my research. So I started at Stanford in 2010 and have been there since. And it's been a very exciting journey, I guess, through grad school, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that too. And as was mentioned, I now currently study this bacterium that lives in the human stomach. It's the only known bacterium that lives permanently in the stomach, and it's called Helicobacter pylori, and it looks like that. So I just kind of wanted, this was a broad overview, but I kind of wanted to step back and just talk a bit about some of the things that really helped me get through college and preparing for college. I think like most students, the big question is, when you get to college is, what do I major in? So I was one of those kids who always thought I would go into a specific field, and that field was astronomy or astrophysics. From, as far as I can remember, I just had this really huge fascination with studying the universe and understanding how galaxies formed. And I remember always going to the library and picking up books about planets and cosmology. And that was actually one of the reasons why I went to Caltech, because they have an excellent program in astrophysics. So that's what I thought I was going to study. I mean, when you see pictures like that, how can you not be interested, right, in studying something like that? And so when I got to Caltech, my freshman year was very overwhelming and very daunting. I started taking courses in physics to prepare myself for this major, and Caltech had a practical track and an analytical track. So the practical track was for the engineers, and the analytical track was for the physicists and the astrophysicists. And so I took the analytical track, but I didn't have a very good, I guess for a college student it was sufficient for most colleges, but a lot of my peers had, mathematical backgrounds that went up to multivariable calculus. They had already taken all that before even coming to college. And I had taken calculus, and I had taken mechanics in high school, but I never had any electricity and magnetism. And when I was a freshman and had to take E&M, the analytical track, that really kind of discouraged me from going on into this field. I mean, part of it was that the professor who taught the course wasn't the best person to teach it, and the rate that they were kind of giving out that information to all the students, it was drinking from a fire hose is the term that people like to use. There's so much information coming at you. So I turned a lot to my peers, I learned a lot from my peers and kind of went to office hours all the time to really try to understand the concepts. I did a lot of reading on my own. The textbook they had us read was so advanced, it just was over my head. I had to go to the library, pick up a more simplified version of E&M and just try to teach myself. So I was a little discouraged with that because I was just well, can I really, continue in this field if this is already so difficult? And I kind of didn't want that to be the reason why I would not go into it. And so that summer, I applied for an internship at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, that NASA center that's down in LA, and I got an internship. And I started working with people who were studying planets and designing machines that would go to various planets, in particular Mars, to look for signs of life and all that. And so that summer gave me the opportunity to really go and talk to people about what they did on a day-to-day basis as an astrophysicist. So my impression up until Caltech was, people can just get these images really quickly, that this is what they're looking at every day. But in fact, when I, went and kind of did these, what I learned now is called informational interviews, going and asking people about what they do on a day-to-day basis in their careers, is that in fact they don't get to see these things, and this image took many years and many people to generate. And so I realized that the idea of what I thought an astrophysicist did was actually a lot more glamorous than it really was. And so I started thinking well, maybe there's something else that is a bit more, tangible for me to go into. And luckily in high school, I had an interest in astrophysics for a long time, but I also developed an interest in geology and studying minerals. And so I thought maybe I could look into geology as a potential major. And while I was researching through the website of the Geology Department, I came across a professor who did some research on studying how microorganisms actually interacted with rocks and minerals. So this is a picture of a microbial mat. So each of these colors, it looks like layers of minerals, but in fact they're bacteria. Each layer here is a particular bacteria that makes this particular pigment. And so this is a very complex community of bacteria living deep in the soil of particular terrestrial environments. And I kind of mustered up the courage to talk to this professor, and she gave me this opportunity to work in her lab. And that's really how I started got into microbiology. I, to be honest, in high school didn't like biology. I never thought I would ever get into it. I thought it was all memorization and there wasn't, But it was so fascinating when I saw her talk about microbes and started really thinking about how complex biological systems are. And so she ended up moving away after about 2 months, so she really gave me this opportunity to work and get exposure. But luckily I found another professor who I'll later kind of show you. He gave me the opportunity to work in his lab where they study the bacteria that live in the human body. And not the bad bacteria, but the good bacteria. And that was a really novel concept for me. I think a lot of us always hear about use sanitizers because you want to kill off all the bacteria, but in fact there's so many bacteria living inside of us that provide very great, essential benefits actually to promote our health. And this lab, this professor, he was very focused on trying to better understand how these good bacteria interact with the human body to promote our health. So then that's kind of how I got into this medical microbiology field, and again I'll talk a little bit more about the research later. But I hope that kind of this story shows that for me the big thing was really keep an open mind. I remember when I was changing my mind about my major, it was actually a really kind of scary time. I came to Caltech thinking I was going to study astrophysics, that was my plan, and I had this whole plan in mind. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I don't know if I could, maybe this is not the right path. And so it was kind of hard to change, but I'm so glad that I did, because I'm very happy with the field that I'm in now. And so I encourage you to always keep an open mind about whatever opportunities may come. Don't just disregard it right away. Give it some kind of consideration and give it a try, even if that's an opportunity, and then make your mind after you have a more informed decision. So that was kind of me choosing my major. That's a big thing. And then the other thing that really helped me when I was going through college is being proactive. So I found this online. I thought it was a really good figure to show how one can act or not react. So you either can act on something or no action, right? But acting, there's two forms of it. You could be proactive or you can be reactive. So reactive is if you're influenced by other people and circumstances, you don't have responsibility, no initiative, something happens to you and you react, right? Proactive means that you're taking the initiative, you're seeking opportunities, you're taking responsibility, and you're kind of taking the lead and the charge on making your decisions. And I really think being proactive will really kind of help you get ahead. And I really like this quote that a postdoc told me, because I think it's really true. It takes courage to start, but also determination to finish. So really being proactive means having that courage to start something, to look for something. And I think for me as a first-gen student, I really had to rely on me being proactive to be able to find the information that I need to get me to the next step. My parents really couldn't tell me, what the next step was. I had to go out and look for people who I looked up to or who I knew would have that information and ask them for that information. So, for example, when I was looking through the geology website, I guess I could have just gone to any person who was teaching my class, but I found that professor who I was really interested in, and I emailed her. That was kind of a risk. I didn't know, it was my first time emailing a professor asking for a research opportunity. And it worked out. I mean, she wrote back, and in fact, she's one of my letter writers, or my letters of recommenders, and she has told me, like, often in my letters, she would say that she was very impressed by how I took the initiative to contact her and to really stay on that research project for the duration of her time at Caltech. So being proactive, it's kind of in the grand scheme of things, it's a small thing to do, but it can lead to really great rewards and opportunities. The other thing I kind of learned while I was in college that I think is really useful is this idea of soft skills, okay? So soft skills get little respect but will make or break your career. I mean, maybe that's a little harsh, but I do think it makes a big difference. And so what are soft skills, right? So maybe you've heard of this idea of the IQ and the EQ. So IQ, intelligence quotient, and EQ stands for emotional quotient. So this picture is depicting that basically your IQ, which is what kind of a lot of people talk about, it's just the tip of the iceberg. The EQ is really what makes a big difference. And EQ is basically how do you relate to people, how do you communicate, how do you work with others. Those are all soft skills, and I can't emphasize enough, like just knowing a lot of information and material is not enough to really get you like too far. You really have to be able to communicate with others, work with others, collaborate, and lead, manage. All these things are soft skills that really will make a big difference, no matter what you do. A lot of these soft skills often are used in networking. So I think for me, that's been a really big part of getting me to where I am now. So many people in my life have helped me, have connected me to others that have eventually given me other opportunities. So for example, one of my mentors at Caltech was a professor who actually recommended me to the professor I ended up working with in Germany. So I had actually emailed the professor in Germany, and she didn't get back to me. I emailed her probably two or three times. So I went to this other professor, my mentor at Caltech, Victoria, and I told her, I'm really interested in working with this professor in Germany. Do you know her? And she's like, yeah, let me send her an email. So she did, and within a day, the other professor in Germany wrote back to me and said, hey, let's talk about a proposal for your Fulbright. So having that connection is so important, and you guys are all starting these connections already with your peers. Your peers are going to be your colleagues, and it's just important to kind of keep in mind, like, just knowing people is only going to help. And networking kind of has a bad connotation, and that people think, oh, it's just like phony relationships, but it's not really. Like you're really using kind of the experience and the connections and expertise of someone else to like be able to help you. Mentors will be great, people to network through. The last thing I wanted to bring up in terms of soft skills is like this idea of time management. So I don't know about you guys, but when I was in college, I was so overwhelmed by all the work. It was just crazy, like to figure out what I had to do first and what to do next. And I really like this chart. I actually didn't see this until I was at Stanford and went to talk about time management. But it's so important. So you have you can break things up into being urgent or non-urgent, or important and not important. And what you find is that a lot of times people are doing important things in urgency. You're leaving things till the last minute, then you have crises, you're cramming for exams and things like that. What you really want to be is in this quadrant, where you're doing important things, but in a non-urgent way, right? So that's basically like preparing for your exam by reading lecture notes like throughout the quarter or something. personal development, figuring out what you want to do early on, not just like, weeks before you need to find a job or something. Exercise and health, that's a really big one. It's not just about the academics, you really need to make sure you're healthy and you're getting, all the like physical activity that you need to keep yourself going. So time management was something I kind of had to figure out when I was in college, and now that I'm in grad school, it's only become even more important to like figure out how to use my time the most efficient way. So then I guess I wanted to go into this this slide here about taking advantages of like self-exploration opportunities. I see a lot of students, even now in grad school, not really taking advantage of workshops or talks about how do you prepare for your career or something like that until they have to go and look for a job, like again, weeks before they need to go look for a job. And all these resources are available on campus. They have people that are hired and trained to like help you go through this. So professional development was a really useful thing to help me learn like what type of person am I? Do I like working with people? Do I not like working with people so much? Do I want to have a more like well-structured kind of work setting, or do I want some flexibility? And so those are some workshops that can really help you better understand who you are as a person, and that will help you figure out like kind of more of where you want to go. And then of course studying abroad is a great opportunity to take advantage of when you're in college. And this is just the image of me, and this is the advisor that I worked with in Germany and kind of my family in Germany. And this was my roommate while I was living abroad, and they were really great. Just this opportunity again to be in a different country was very eye-opening to be able to like be in a different culture. So I really encourage you to do that. So I think then the next thing I kind of really wanted to emphasize is the value of mentors. So I'm sure a lot of you have had some really great mentors and continue to have great mentors, and I hope you have more great mentors. So for me personally, I just kind of wanted to bring up my very first mentor that I can remember is actually my second grade teacher. This is Miss Lai. She helped my family get through so many non-school related things, like when my grandmother came and had to get all these immunizations. I remember she drove my mom, myself, and my grandmother to the doctor to get all that done and help us translate, because my mother doesn't speak any English and I was kind of too young to be able to do that with a doctor. And she's continued to be my mentor throughout the years. This is me like just a couple of years ago. We still meet up and keep in touch, let her know how I'm doing. It's just, so mentors are not people that some mentors you might just like interact with for a short period and then not talk to, but others can be lifelong friends. And certainly Ms. Lai is my mentor and my friend. Same thing with this Ms. Paulson, who's my high school teacher. She really was the one who got me interested in doing scientific research. She ran this program in the magnets program in my high school. And this is actually her at my scientific talk while I was at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. She came and kind of heard me give my very first scientific talk. And she continues again to be my great mentor, and then also an English teacher of mine. So the two of them in high school were really my foundation and helping me so what was really great about Ms. Passer was that she gave me the perspective from the humanities side. It's really good to get various perspectives and not just be focused on one particular type of person. So this was, she attended my graduation at Caltech. And so then, of course, when you're in college, really important is to seek out mentors there too, and it's really great to seek mentors in the professors. So as I mentioned, I had several, namely 3 professors at Caltech who really made a big difference for me. Diane Newman was the professor who gave me that first opportunity to work in her lab, as a geobiologist. And then Victoria is the one who connected me to the professor in Germany. And then I ended up working with Sarkis Mesmanian, who was the one who started studying microbes, and he really kind of took a chance on me too. He was a new professor at Caltech, and decided that he really wanted to mentor me, and I worked in his lab for 2 years to really learn how to do science. And so I really like this proverb: better than 1,000 days of diligent study is 1 day with a great teacher. I really do believe that. And now this is my current professor, Manuel, who's at Stanford, and it's been really great working with him too and learning from him. So for all of you guys, yes, you can all do it. There's definitely a lot of challenges, and people will tell you that you might not be able to do it because of your background. I certainly got a lot of that when I was going through college. Some people had even made remarks that, oh, as a first gen or something, you can't get too far in life, but you could definitely prove them wrong.